Welcome to NTD News. I'm Kevin Hogan. Here are today's top stories. A heated exchange in Congress. A lawmaker asks Dr. Fauci when the restrictions will end, but he isn't satisfied with the answer. A House committee hears testimony about why police failed to protect the Capitol on January 6th. The Inspector General of Capitol Police testifies about the findings of his investigation. Video footage shows the police shooting of a teenager in Chicago. We hear from the family's lawyer and police officials about the moments that led up to his death. And more body cam footage shows a tense standoff between police and a man with a gun in a Columbus, Ohio hospital. The shootout that followed left the man dead. Hong Kong sends some of its most influential pro-democracy figures to prison. The city that was once semi-autonomous now faces Beijing's crackdown on its remaining dissidents. Eight people died and several others were wounded in a horrific shooting in Indianapolis. Police say 5 people were hospitalized and 2 people were treated and released at the scene. Details are still coming in and authorities have not yet identified the gunman or his motives. We do know that late Thursday night, a gunman opened fire at a FedEx operations center near Indianapolis International Airport. Police say he started randomly shooting at people in the parking lot and went into the building where he shot himself. A FedEx spokesman says the company is deeply shocked and saddened by the loss, but didn't clarify if all those killed were FedEx employees. Our hearts go out to the victims of this tragedy. Japan's Prime Minister placed a memorial wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington National Cemetery on Friday. He's set to meet with President Biden at the White House this afternoon. Prime Minister Suga is the first head of state invited to an in-person meeting with Biden. This underscores Tokyo's role in helping the U.S. to counter the challenge of China's growing assertiveness. The one-day summit is expected to yield steps to diversify supply chains that are over-reliant on China. Japan is also expected to commit $2 billion to work with the U.S. on alternatives to Chinese firm Huawei's 5G network. Biden and Suga are also expected to discuss human rights issues related to China, including the situation in Hong Kong and Xinjiang. The two are set to give a joint news conference at 4:15 p.m. Eastern. The CDC says nearly 6,000 Americans have contracted the virus after being fully vaccinated. The agency's director says they're investigating some of the cases.
CDC Director Rachel Walensky told lawmakers Thursday that 5,800 fully vaccinated Americans have contracted the CCP virus. Of these so-called breakthrough cases, nearly 400 required hospital treatment and 74 died.
Some of these breakthroughs are, of course, failure of an immune response in the host, and then some of them we worry might be related to a variant that is circulating, so we're looking at both.
She said the cases don't include people who got the virus within 2 weeks of their final dose. About 40% of the infections were in people over 60 years old. 65% were female.
What's going on here?
And infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci says he hopes the Johnson & Johnson vaccine gets back on track soon. The U.S. paused distribution of the vaccine earlier this week to investigate reports of blood clots.
I mean, I think they need to make a decision quickly. The concern is that the longer you draw it out, the more they'll be, concerned about not only that vaccine, but might even have an impact on vaccine hesitancy in general.
As of Wednesday, 7 women had developed a rare and severe type of blood clot after receiving the J&J vaccine. The company says the safety and well-being of the people who use their products is their #1 priority. J&J says it believes the benefits of the vaccine continue to outweigh the risks. And things got heated Thursday after Republican Congressman Jim Jordan asked Fauci when the pandemic restrictions will end.
What measure, what standard, what objective outcome do we have to reach before Americans get their liberty and freedoms back?
You're indicating liberty and freedom. I look at it as a public health measure to prevent people from dying and going to the hospital.
You don't think Americans' liberties have been threatened the last year, Dr. Fauci? They've been assaulted. Their liberties have.
I don't look at this as a liberty thing.
Fauci said as more people get vaccinated and infections go down, there'll be more flexibility. But he didn't give Jordan a specific number.
The Capitol Police Inspector General testified in Congress Thursday. He shares the findings of his investigation into the Capitol Police response on January 6th.
Michael Bolton is the Capitol Police Inspector General. He tells a House committee why police failed to keep protesters from breaching the Capitol on January 6th.
My office sees continuing areas in our findings that need to be addressed. Those areas are intelligence, training, operational planning, and a cultural change.
Bolton explains that the Capitol Police doesn't see itself as a normal police force because it also has a protective mission.
A police department is geared to being reactive for the most part, whereas a protective agency is postured in their training and planning to be proactive to prevent events such as January 6th.
Bolton explains the key to making necessary changes.
Training is got to be taken seriously. It can't be an afterthought.
He tells the committee it's the best investment they can make in the force.
If you want to invest dollars, that's the place to invest in, is training. It's your foundation.
Bolton says the agency's leadership should have given officers the resources they need.
I would say it's the responsibility for officers having the proper equipment, training, and coordination is going to be your leadership.
He didn't single anyone out.
It's not one particular person, it's the leadership of the department as a whole.
Reports say Bolton's investigation points to numerous problems that remain at the agency, including faulty equipment and problems with the Civil Disturbance Unit. That department is supposed to protect Congress. Bolton's full report hasn't been made public.
Democratic lawmakers introduced a bill on Thursday that would add 4 seats to the U.S. Supreme Court. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says while she's not ruling out the expansion for now, she will not bring the bill to a vote. But House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says the Democrats' proposal should scare every single American.
Democrats in both chambers of Congress Thursday unveiled legislation that would expand the U.S. Supreme Court. The bill seeks to increase the number of seats on the High Court from the current 9 to 13. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she's not committing to bringing the bill to a vote. She said expanding the Supreme Court could happen, but should be studied first.
I don't know that that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think it's an idea that should be considered, and I think the president's taking the right approach to have a commission to study such a thing. It's a big step. It's not out of the question. It has been done before in the history of our country a long time ago.
Republicans note that Congress rejected the last presidential effort at expansion by Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt. In an interview with Fox Business Thursday, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy argued that the Democrats' proposal to add 4 seats to the court should scare every single American, regardless of where they stand politically. At his weekly press conference, McCarthy said he never believed Democrats would go this far.
Ironically, it's the same number needed to give Democrats a 1-seat edge and the President Biden the power to appoint 4 justices. Never in my time in politics did I ever believe they would go this far.
President Biden signed an executive order last week establishing a 36-member commission to study possible reforms to the Supreme Court, including expansion.
Republican Congressman Andy Biggs introduced a constitutional amendment to keep the Supreme Court at 9 justices. But the move is unlikely to pass, given the Democrat majority in both chambers of Congress. A bipartisan group of 30 Congress members wants to repeal a Trump-era cap on state and local tax deductions. Biden's proposed tax hike to pay for his infrastructure plan gives them some leverage. NTD's Melina Weiskopf has the story.
As the Biden administration grapples with how to pay for the proposed $2 trillion infrastructure plan, tax reform is in the spotlight. A bipartisan group of Congress members wants to use the opportunity to repeal the cap for SALT, or state and local tax deductions.
You know, I've said before, no salt, no deal. Josh says no salt, no dice. Billy says a lot of things. So we all, we're all saying that this has to be part of the conversation.
New Jersey Congressman Josh Gottheimer said people are leaving his state because the taxes are too high. That's why he wants to repeal the Trump-era $10,000 cap on state and local tax deductions.
It's an effort by the federal government to compel voters in states like New Jersey, New York, and California to choose different policies.
He, along with several other caucus members, sent a letter to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen calling for a SALT cap repeal to be a part of Biden's broader tax and infrastructure plans.
I am open to ambitious revenue raising as part of these bills. If it affects the individual taxes of my constituents, we've got to address SALT as part of that effort.
Some Republicans are joining Democrats in this effort, but urge high-tax states to hold the line taxing their citizens.
But it's not a license for the local municipalities in the states to continue to increase their taxes and abuse the people that they represent. Thank you very much.
Maliotakis said New York City's property tax levy increased over 50% in the past few years.
Well, I was one of the first original advocates of the property tax cap because at Long Island the taxes are so high, and all of New York State they're very high.
Saying he'd support state legislation in New York to cap the New York City property tax. People living in high-tax states and who fall within the middle to upper-income classes have been hit the hardest by the SALT cap. And now Biden plans to raise taxes for high-income earners, particularly those making over $400,000 a year. That means middle to upper-income class people could be further impacted by Biden's tax plan if the SALT cap isn't repealed. So it's clear the Biden administration is going to have to put in a significant amount of effort to negotiate with members of this SALT caucus in order for Congress to write a solid piece of legislation on infrastructure that can actually pass through the House and through the Senate. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
A police watchdog released body cam footage of a 13-year-old boy in Chicago being shot by an officer. The agency says it's investigating the use of deadly force. We hear from the lawyer of the deceased boy's family and from police officials. Take a look.
The Civilian Office of Police Accountability released videos showing 13-year-old Adam Toledo running from police before an officer shot him. Chicago police said officers were responding to gunfire they detected before the shooting. Toledo died from a gunshot wound to his chest on March 29th, according to the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office. The Toledo family's lawyer makes her case.
He was given a directive from the officer, show me your hands. That child complied, lift up his hands, and was shot in the middle of his chest.
Police chased Toledo down an alley in Little Village on the city's west side and told him to stop and show them his hands. Toledo then turns to the camera and the officer yells, "Drop it." Midway between repeating the command, the officer opens fire and the teen drops to the ground. The president of the Chicago Fraternal Order of Police comments on the incident.
Well, time-lapse photo shows that officer had 0.8 of a second to determine if that weapon was still in his hand or not. Period. There's no way a rational person can say they can process that and their muscle reaction would be less than 1 second.
It's not clear from the body cam footage if Toledo was holding anything in his hands when he turned around.
Stay with me, hey. Stay with me. Hey, stay awake, man.
Police said Toledo had a handgun in his possession that investigators recovered. The same office that released the body cam footage is investigating the shooting and the deadly use of force by Officer Eric Stillman.
Police released body cam footage Thursday that shows the scene of a tense standoff earlier this week in Ohio. The police shouted a man with a gun to put his hands up. They say the man fired at police before officers returned fire. Police footage released Thursday shows the scene of a tense standoff. Police scream at a man with a gun to put his hands up. Police say he fired at them before they returned fire.
Taser,
The footage shows police searching Miles Jackson inside an Ohio hospital room. They try to handcuff him after they find a gun. It appears Jackson keeps reaching for the gun as they try to get his hands behind his back. The police yell at him to comply as they wrestle with him.
Give me your arm now! Get out of there now!
Jackson says he is going to comply as the police wrestle him to the ground. It appears he still has his hands in front of him toward the gun. The police begin to tase him. He screams and someone fires a shot. The police say Jackson then shot at them. It appears an officer shoots too, but no one is hit yet. An officer says Jackson shot at him.
Be careful. He fired a shot off. Okay. I don't even know how I didn't get hit.
Police scream at Jackson to put his hands on his head. He says he's scared they will shoot him if he moves.
Get your other hand on your head now! I'm just scared. Get your hand up! I'm just scared if I move, you gotta go in the shoot. No! Put your hand on your head!
Several police point guns at the victim and yell at him to comply. Several bangs are heard before police open fire. Jackson was later pronounced dead at the hospital. The chief Border Patrol agent of the San Diego area has published a distressing video. It captures a smuggler dropping a 2-year-old child from an 18-foot border wall down to the child's father. The agent wrote that the video was taken on Sunday and that the child wasn't hurt. Customs and Border Protection released an operational update last week. It stated that more than 170,000 illegal immigrants had been apprehended in March along the southwest border. The agency stated that compared to February, March had seen a 100% increase of unaccompanied minors from Central America. In another incident, the chief patrol agent of the Rio Grande sector published 2 shocking photos. They showed people stuffed into a makeshift compartment on the bottom of a trailer. The agent said children ages 10 and 15 were found, along with 18 adults. More and more children across the country are back in school now, but many schools are still closed for in-person learning. That's why one group of parents in Pennsylvania is working hard to get kids back into real classrooms safely. NTD's Allison Lee brings us more.
Parents from the Keeping Kids in School Political Action Committee, or PAC, in Pennsylvania want to put children back in school, and they're running for local school boards in order to do it. The treasurer of the committee, Misty Lawflurry, says remote learning impacts not just the students, but also their parents and the economy.
We finally have data, we didn't have it for so long, shows that schools are not places where kids are spreading COVID. If anything it's happened, it's been from teachers, other adults spreading it to kids versus the opposite. And so knowing this and seeing all this data shows us that that's one huge obstacle that no longer is in front of us.
An analysis shows that self-harm claims among U.S. teens are up to 100% during the pandemic. A CDC report also suggests that virtual learning might present more risk to children and parents' mental and emotional health than in-person learning does. The CDC updated its guidelines last month, recommending 3 feet of social distancing in schools instead of 6 feet. Fleury says this is a good sign and would allow for more students to be back in school. She hopes more restrictions can start to ease.
So many parents have had to come out of the workforce I think we have over 2.5 million double income parents in the workforce, and parents have had to come out to help take care of their kids and make sure they're schooled to live on welfare, whatever that might be, or they've lost one job when they maybe were a dual income house.
The founder of the PAC believes parents should have the choice to either send their children to school or keep them at home. She says choice should also apply to vaccination, but she has some concerns when it comes to vaccinating children.
I do fear that the vaccination, is not yet approved for 16 and under. So I think that it's a little premature to look at, vaccinating our youth, our very young youth, before the appropriate studies have been done.
Fleury says in her local school district, there has been no case of intra-school transmission from students to students or from students to teachers. She hopes resuming in-person learning can allow parents to go back to work, keep the economy running, and stop the deterioration of students' mental health. Allison Lee, NTD News.
MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell is launching a new social media platform. It's set to launch on Monday, April 19th. The new platform is called Frank, and its mission is to provide a place for free speech. Frank is described as a combination of Twitter and YouTube. In a video statement, Lindell says he's taken steps to make sure the site is secure and uses its own servers. He says it won't be subject to big tech censorship, but threatening violence and foul language won't be allowed. Lindell tells the Epoch Times that Frank is projected to draw tens of millions of users in the first week of its operation. Coming up, a video leaked from 2019 gets confirmation from the Defense Department. A clip captures a pyramid-shaped UFO, which officials say is the real thing. New York's largest healthcare provider offers mental health services for its employees and their families. A new center helps them deal with the stresses of the past year. Find out more on NTD News. The truth is out there, and now there might be actual video evidence. The Defense Department has confirmed this leaked video taken in 2019 is the real thing, a legitimate UFO. The Pentagon has confirmed the unidentified flying objects moving through the clouds were taken by Navy personnel. The military's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force is investigating these three strange air or spacecraft. One appears to be triangle-shaped, another shaped like an acorn, another one described as a metallic blip, which moves like a rocket. Beyond confirming that the phenomenon is unexplained, the DoD will not provide additional information for security reasons. The military says officials don't want to provide information that would be helpful to adversaries, presumably terrestrial ones. New York's largest healthcare provider is offering mental health services to its over 75,000 healthcare workers and their families. The program is designed to help them cope with the impacts of the pandemic. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Northwell's Center for Traumatic Stress, Resilience, and Recovery is working to help those suffering after the events of the past year. The facility will offer resilience and traumatic stress services designed to help essential workers deal with stress before it becomes overwhelming. Carlos Rivera is an environmental services worker at Cohen Children's Medical Center. Rivera's father and grandmother died from the pandemic last April.
I'm generally a strong person, but at times, you get emotional, and, anniversaries, birthdays, a day such like today, because Dad died a year from today.
Elisa Sopo is a critical care nurse practitioner at North Shore University Hospital. She thought she could just tough it out after her parents caught the virus last year.
I thought I was strong. I really did. I really thought I was strong. I thought I was doing well. I kind of had a wall up, and I was doing my job, and I was working hard. And I went a day until there was days that I would just spiral, and I would just break down that, oh my God, how am I doing this? I'm tired. I'm exhausted.
Dr. Frederick Davis is the Associate Chair for the Emergency Department at Long Island Jewish Medical Center. He spoke about how the pandemic has driven some of these medical professionals to the brink.
A number of healthcare providers have unfortunately committed suicide over this past year, and I think this is really what highlights the importance of this center, to really prevent that, to really recognize people that are going through harder times and really offer that support.
According to the American Psychological Association, nearly 30% of essential workers in the U.S. have said their mental health has declined, including many in the healthcare and law enforcement sectors. And 75% said they could have used more emotional support since the pandemic started. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Drug overdoses in the U.S. reached the highest levels on record during the pandemic, and experts believe opioids share much of the blame for that. According to preliminary CDC data, almost 90,000 Americans died from an overdose over the one-year period ending in September 2020. That's not only an almost 30% jump from the year before, but it's also the highest number since the CDC started tracking those deaths in 1999. The report says the main driver behind those deaths were synthetic opioids, along with heroin and prescription painkillers. But the CDC also noted a steady rise in deaths related to methamphetamines and prescription stimulants. And just ahead, trucking companies rush to hire more drivers to meet demand. Some are raising drivers' wages as much as 40%. And entrepreneurs in New York City defeat the odds with new business models. They see great opportunities in the empty storefronts out on the market. Find out more in just a moment on NTD News.
If you're like me, and I think it's actually most of us, then you're getting really fed up with the nonsense going on inside the banking system. I mean, we've worked hard our entire lives to retire comfortably. We just recovered from the crash of 2008, and it seems like it's about to happen all over again. Look at the too-big-to-fail banks. They're only getting bigger as the Fed hands them trillions of dollars daily, while simple folks like you and me, we're only getting the short end of the stick. That's why I'm glad I found this book called The Bank Failure Survival Guide. Give us a call, and we'll send you a free copy with no obligations whatsoever. Just one American to another, telling you about some options that you might not have considered. Call 866-239-2619 today for your free copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide. That's 866-239-2619.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
With retail sales up so much, who's going to deliver everything? Trucking companies are struggling to find workers to keep up with demand, so now they're offering more money. Here's our latest financial and business news on jobs and the economy.
Trucking companies rushing to hire drivers as demand surges, and many are doing it by raising pay.
Overall pay for drivers has gone up about, from what I understand, about 15% in the last year or so.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics says truck driver median pay was over $47,000 in 2020. That's expected to rise as the lockdowns fade.
It's always been an issue that has been in the industry. It's common. One of the big issues is wages, and we're starting to see some of the companies increase wages in totality.
Knight Swift Transportation Holdings, the largest truckload carrier in North America, says its pay recently rose by 40%. Meanwhile, Crete Carrier says its pay raises will place 50% of its drivers' average pay at almost $90,000. Another big company, Yellow Corp, recently hired around 2,000 drivers and recently said it plans on opening 12 new academies.
Between March and April of last year, nearly 100,000 driver jobs were shed. During a downturn, you get rid of the drivers you don't need. So when the economy ultimately inflects upward, you have to start that process of finding drivers again.
Experts expect pandemic aid and COVID vaccinations to fuel driver demand. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Walmart is planning to convert more staffers to full-time jobs. By the end of the year, the retailer expects 2/3 of employees will be out of hourly roles and into full-time positions. Walmart says the shift will mean about 100,000 more full-time employees than they had 5 years ago. It's all part of the company's initiative to promote job stability and retain workers. Recently, Walmart raised its hourly wages to an average of about $15 an hour. We've been pretty pessimistic on small business since the pandemic began. Non-stop lockdowns, online shopping putting pressure on many of them. But small business owners are resilient. You gotta be. And some took the challenging environment as an opportunity and opened shop. NTD's Evelyn Lee asked them how they did it and how it's going now.
Taking a walk through New York City, you'll notice that the once bustling city is now filled with empty storefronts. But with every empty space, there's also someone who sees an opportunity.
We've been thrilled to try and be on the forefront of helping bring New York back.
During the pandemic, roughly 1/3 of the 240,000 small businesses that populate the city's commercial corridors had to shut their doors for good. That's according to the Partnership for New York City. But when life gave these entrepreneurs lemons, they made cocktails.
When we came in with our original business model, which we've thrown out the door probably a half dozen times, rewritten another dozen.
While they plan to be primarily a place for music and drinks, the business partners for 29 Monroe had to shift more focus toward their food offerings.
One way that we had to reinvent and still try to create a high-quality product while staying within the new world that we're living in.
Nimbus Kitchen, that offers on-demand kitchen solutions, had a similar experience and needed to reinvent themselves. When the city went into full lockdown, Samantha and Camilla were already deep into construction for their first location. But with the rise of food delivery, Nimbus saw an opportunity and seized it.
It was not intentional, and we were able to really pivot and focus on those delivery-only operators and launch in this pandemic successfully.
According to the CEO of Franchise Academy, the economic conditions for opening a business now are better than in previous economic downturns. According to him, banks are willing to finance entrepreneurs who are starting something new. But this isn't what determines your business's success.
And you have to be able to, pivot quickly and, stay very nimble.
If you can't go over them, go through them. If you can't go through them, go under them. And that type of mentality, scrappy entrepreneurialism, more often than not, that will get you through over talent, experience, investors, or anything else.
Carlos Barreto has had to pivot and make last-minute changes as well. His company, Cleverman, produces part of its product in Italy, Europe's virus epicenter. But he says they've made it through successfully.
So now we have a very diverse team that is working in different locations. We were able to solve all those different challenges through this time.
Because of the pandemic, New York City's small business sector lost roughly 520,000 jobs. But now, a year later, the city is slowly coming back to life. Nimbus will soon offer even more kitchen space for rent, making it easier for restaurants that have been displaced to keep up their business, while Cleverman and 29 Monroe continue to grow their businesses.
Forrest Gump seems to have some competition, at least where California is concerned. That's where a furry new friend has been spotted pounding the pavement. The Santa Clarita Valley Sheriff's Office got a picture of this giant teddy bear strolling through town. A deputy who met the person inside the bear suit found out that the goal is to walk all the way from Los Angeles to San Francisco. According to local media, he goes by Bear Son, and he's documenting his long walk on Instagram. He started his trip on Monday and hopes to get to San Fran by Saturday. And soon we address the question, what can the U.S. do to counter the Chinese Communist Party's economic ambitions? A former Trump official says the best tool is America's core values. A major sandstorm is raging through Beijing. The air quality index there is more than 3 times the limit of what's considered safe. Stay tuned to find out more. Hong Kong is sending some of the most influential pro-democracy figures to prison. The city that was once semi-autonomous is now facing Beijing's crackdown. NTD's Penny Zhou has the latest.
Some of Hong Kong's most prominent pro-democracy figures are going to prison. On Friday, the city's father of democracy, Martin Lee, was sentenced to a suspended 11 months in jail. 7 former opposition lawmakers will also be jailed from 8 to 18 months. The reason for their imprisonment, they participated in 2 pro-democracy protests in 2019. Defense lawyers argued that the assemblies in question are peaceful and their clients have long been against violence. The heaviest sentence went to activist and former lawmaker Lee Chak-yan, who will spend 18 months behind bars. He thanked supporters before going into the court.
No matter whether we are in jail or outside, we work together. So I want to thank you, all the people of Hong Kong, for the comradeship, the feeling of solidarity together. And with this feeling of solidarity, we can win.
Hong Kong's media tycoon Jimmy Lai, who is already in detention, was sentenced to a year in prison. The 73-year-old founder of Apple Daily is a fierce critic of Beijing and previously said he would not escape Hong Kong.
I cannot do that. You know, if I leave, not only I disgrace myself, I discredit Apple Daily and also undermine the solidarity of the democratic movement. It's something I have to take responsibility.
73-year-old Margaret Ng was also sentenced. She served as an opposition lawmaker for 18 years. The Hong Kong court argued that the sentence terms will prevent similar protests from happening. The sentencing drew immense media and public attention. Envoys from the United States, European Union, Germany, Canada, France, Netherlands, and Sweden attended the hearing.
I mean, we're following this because, as I say, it involves pro-democracy figures and also it involves a peaceful protest. So clearly, this is of interest, legitimate interest to the international community, and that's why we're here today.
The sentencing came after Beijing implemented a law in Hong Kong that criminalizes criticism against Chinese and Hong Kong authorities. Earlier this month, Beijing changed the city's electoral rules to ensure only those loyal to Beijing can be in power. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
What can the U.S. do to counter the Chinese Communist Party's economic ambitions? A former Trump official says the best tool at our disposal is America's core values. NTD's Lin Lin has the details.
Former Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Pottinger is telling a congressional commission on China that among the Trump administration's hundreds of actions against Beijing, the one that upset Beijing the most is that we called them out publicly for crimes against humanity and genocide of its own people. He urges Congress to use every opportunity to speak out about what Americans stand for and who we stand up for.
The one thing that the Communist Party cannot weaponize effectively is what it stands for, because the only thing it stands for is its own power. So we must never, ever neglect the advantage that our values provide us in this fight.
Pottinger says by taking advantage of Western capital, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is exploiting the global free market system in many ways. He believes Wall Street must confront the reality that Beijing is waging an existential fight against the free world.
So it's not too much to ask to require American index funds and university endowments, pensions, and venture capital firms to stop funding the expansion of the Chinese empire.
Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's China policy advisor Miles Yu also testified. He says every American should understand that communist China is a communist dictatorship ruled by a Marxist-Leninist party.
The economic challenge of the Chinese Communist Party is not a matter of if we should or should not change Beijing's paradoxical economic reality. It is a matter of if we don't change its behavior, the free world will be changed by Beijing.
Yu warns that the CCP amounts to the most serious challenge to the free world since the Cold War. Lin Lin, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
A major video streaming platform in China faces an over $70 million fine. The company's founder has also been barred for life from trading in the securities market. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more on the story.
A major Chinese video streaming provider is being fined for decades worth of fraud. Leshi Internet Information and Technology has been fined more than $70 million by regulators. Its founder, Jia Yeting, is also facing the same penalty. The punishments were doled out because of financial fraud committed from 2007 to 2016. Jia is also barred for life from trading in the securities market. China's Securities Regulatory Commission announced the penalty earlier this week. The company charged with falsifying earnings and misreporting facts in its initial public offering or IPO documents. Regulators started probing the company in April of 2019. That's after the company disclosed Jia, its biggest shareholder, was suspected of violating financial disclosure laws. The company first started trading on a technology board for Chinese startups back in 2010. Part of the Shenzhen Stock Exchange. And according to the company, the $74 million penalty represents 5% of the funds raised in its IPO. Yellow skies descended on Beijing Thursday as a sandstorm raged through the city. A giant cloud of sand and dust particles rolled into the area, carried by strong winds from northern China. City authorities say Beijing's air quality index rose to over 320 Thursday afternoon. That's more than 3 times the limit of what's considered safe. Online, Beijing citizens described the storm. One wrote, "In the morning, the sun was still shining and the sky was clear. But by the afternoon, it suddenly looked like the end of the world in Beijing." Beijing's meteorological observatory predicts strong winds over the next 3 days, accompanied by dust and thunderstorms. Most of northern China has felt the impacts of the sandstorm. Chinese authorities say the pollutants come from Mongolia and the Chinese region of Inner Mongolia. Forecasters say high winds will carry them into central and eastern China by Friday.
Beijing is condemning Japan over a decision to discharge radioactive wastewater into the ocean. But now China is found to have been doing exactly the same thing. Here are the details.
The Japanese government plans to release treated wastewater from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant to the Pacific Ocean. The radioactive water discharge is scheduled for 2 years from now. Japanese authorities have reassured the public that the treated and diluted water will be decontaminated to a safe level. But the decision is still sparking opposition from neighboring countries. The main concern is that the treated waste will contain tritium, a radioactive substance. China has been among the most vocal in opposing the decision. It's also urging the U.S. to stay impartial on the issue. China's foreign ministry strongly condemned Japan on Tuesday, calling the decision extremely irresponsible and saying it may take action in response. Yet new information has exposed Beijing's apparent hypocrisy on the issue. According to media outlet Hong Kong Citizen News, every one of China's 49 existing nuclear power units were found to dump nuclear wastewater into the ocean. One of them, the Daya Bay Nuclear Power Station, is just 30 miles from Hong Kong. It's responsible for releasing 10 times more tritium as Japan's Fukushima. As of the end of last year, there are 16 total nuclear power plants in China, with 49 nuclear power units in operation.
Up next, a new smartphone app will allow the British public to help conservationists. It's designed to track the UK's grey seal population, which makes up 40% of the species worldwide. Find out more here on NTD News.
Do you have a life insurance policy you no longer need? Now you can sell your policy, even a term policy, for an immediate cash payment. Call Coventry Direct to learn more.
We thought we had planned carefully for our retirement.
But we quickly realized we needed a way to supplement our income.
Our friends sold their policy to help pay their medical bills. And that got me thinking. Maybe selling our policy could help with our retirement.
I was skeptical, so I did some research and called Coventry Direct. They explained life insurance is a valuable asset that can be sold.
We learned we could sell all of our policy or keep part of it with no future payments. Who knew? We sold our policy. Now we can relax and enjoy our retirement as we had planned.
If you have $100,000 or more of life insurance, you may qualify to sell your policy. Don't cancel or let your policy lapse without finding out what it's worth. Visit CoventryDirect.com to find out if your policy qualifies, or call 1-800-509-8500. Coventry Direct, redefining insurance.
During the 2008 recession, Americans lost over $2 trillion from their 401ks. For many people, retirement was no longer an option. But do you know what tried and true investment nearly doubled its value following the recession? Gold. Protect your money. Buy gold. For your free direct bullion guide to buying gold, call 1-800-757-7050. Start your collection today. We can't control political volatility, inflation, massive government debt, or the wild swings of the stock market. But we can control where we put our money. Gold is easily outperforming the stock market the last 20 years. Protect your money. Buy gold. For your free direct bullion guide to buying gold, call 1-800-757-7050.
NATO is concerned over a buildup of Russian troops near the Ukrainian border. After an emergency meeting on Wednesday, the alliance is calling for de-escalation. Moscow says the buildup is in response to NATO threats.
The head of NATO on Wednesday called on Russia to pull back troops near Ukraine's border.
Allies fully support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and we call on Russia to de-escalate immediately, stop its pattern of aggressive provocations, and respect its international commitments.
He was speaking after an emergency meeting of NATO foreign and defense ministers. NATO says the number of Russian troops massed on Ukraine's borders is the highest since 2014. Additionally, fighting has increased in recent weeks in eastern Ukraine. Government forces there have battled Russian-backed separatists in a 7-year conflict that Kiev says has killed 14,000 people. NATO is also concerned about Russia's troop buildup in Crimea. Russia annexed the peninsula from Ukraine in 2014. Ukraine's defense minister on Wednesday accused Russia of preparing to potentially store nuclear weapons in Crimea. US President Joe Biden called Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday to propose a meeting of the estranged leaders. Ukraine's ambassador to the UK on Wednesday said he welcomed Biden's move and says he doesn't know Putin's motivation.
We don't know how far he's eager to go, what his internal position is, what his internal politics dynamics is dictating him. We just hope that with enough resolve and posture, we can tell him that's not easy, low-hanging fruit. He has to take advantage of it.
He's hopeful that the joint efforts will be able to avert a war. 2 U.S. warships are due to arrive in the Black Sea this week. Russia warned Washington to stay away from Crimea. Moscow says the buildup is a 3-week snap military drill to test combat readiness in response to what it calls threatening behavior from NATO.
Over to Europe. The Royal College of Surgeons of England says it's been 5 years since the country's National Health Service last met the 18-week waiting times target. They say investment on a scale last seen in the 2000s is needed. The British Prime Minister says the government will do whatever it takes to help the NHS beat the backlog. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us more.
The government set the waiting time standard in 2004. It says that no one should have to wait longer than 18 weeks from GP referral to hospital treatment. It's part of the NHS constitution, and trusts continue to report performance against it monthly. But according to NHS data, the waiting list for hospital treatment is now 4.7 million, the highest since records began in 2007. And almost 400,000 patients have now been waiting over a year. This compares to about 1,600 people waiting over a year in February 2020. Prime Minister Boris Johnson commented.
This is a real priority now for our country. 4.7 million people on waiting lists. Of course, it's been exacerbated. It's been made worse by COVID. People, I don't think, have been going to hospital, haven't been going to use medical facilities in the way that they might have been throughout the pandemic.
The Vice President of the Royal College of Surgeons of England says the symptoms were there even before the pandemic, but the problem has now become chronic and needs long-term treatment. NHS England introduced a zero tolerance of any referral to treatment waits of more than 52 weeks in 2013-14. Cancer Research UK says urgent cancer referrals dropped in February by 8% on February 2020, and the data also shows a 6% reduction in the number of patients starting cancer treatment compared with February 2020. Kruti Shrotri of Cancer Research UK says while it's positive that urgent cancer referrals didn't plummet like they did in the first wave, these February figures show the cancer backlog continues to build. Johnson says the government will do whatever it takes to provide the NHS with the funding it needs to beat the backlog. COVID-19 continues to affect us all in so many ways, for some more than others. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, Epsom, Surrey.
A new smartphone app is rolling out across the UK. Its data may help conservationists keep track of the country's seal populations. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Grey seals at Brixham Marina on England's southwest coast aren't too hard to spot as they soak up the sun. Conservationists here are calling on citizen scientists across the UK to help track the country's seal populations. Conservation charity, the Seal Project, and researchers at the University of Plymouth have launched a new Seal Spotter smartphone app. Members of the public can use it to log a seal's location, appearance, behavior, and condition.
It helps us understand more about the life of the grey seals around our coast, because we have about 40% of the global population of grey seals in the UK around the UK waters. So as a vulnerable species, we need to kind of understand more about them so we can better protect them.
According to the Wildlife Trust organization, grey seal numbers dropped to just 500 in the early 20th century. But now, it's estimated there are about 120,000 of the marine mammals in the UK. The app helps people report whether the seals are alone or in a group, and if they're resting, feeding, or fighting. Users can also report whether seals have become entangled in plastic or are showing other signs of injury or health issues. That data could help conservationists more accurately map the health of local populations.
We are seeing them in different locations, but obviously we can't be everywhere, so to have other people looking around for us will give us information into hangouts that we're not aware of, because obviously we can only be in so many locations at once.
Early trials on England's southwest coast have reported new pups, plus other animals moving into the area. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Still to come, NASA prepares to test a helicopter on Mars. It could be another Wright brothers moment, this time on another planet. Check it out in just a minute. NASA is planning the first flight of its experimental Martian helicopter next week. The mission could mark the first powered, controlled flight on another planet. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
NASA's newest Mars rover, Perseverance, has been the star of the Red Planet recently. But before the car-sized vehicle can head for an ancient river delta to collect rocks for eventual return to Earth, it must release an experimental helicopter named Ingenuity.
From day one, this was the unwavering dream of our team, to get our helicopter launched to Mars so that we can get that opportunity to do the very first rotorcraft flight test in the actual environment of Mars.
One of the biggest challenges scientists and engineers face is how to get the helicopter off the ground in the Martian environment. Atmospheric pressure on the red planet is very low, about 1% of that on Earth. The attempt could mark the first powered, controlled flight on another planet. In fact, the Mars helicopter holds a piece of the Wright brothers' first airplane, a small piece of fabric from the 1903 Wright Flyer.
Sometimes, you have to do something just to show that you can do it, in order to show that it's possible. And so when the Wright brothers, flew for the first time, they didn't fly a fully equipped passenger airplane. They flew an experimental aircraft.
NASA's 4-pound helicopter will attempt to rise 10 feet into the extremely thin Martian air on its first hop. If Ingenuity is successful during its 31-day experimental trip, the small helicopter will prove that powered flights can be accomplished on Mars. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Ralph Lauren unveils uniforms for Team USA's Olympic and Paralympic teams. The outfits will be worn during the closing ceremony parade in the 2020 Olympics. The clothing line is manufactured in the United States and uses sustainable materials in manufacturing. American Olympians like swimmers Katie Ledecky and Nathan Adrian are taking part in the current promotional campaign. Ralph Lauren has been an official outfitter of the Team USA since 2008. The company says all revenues from the sale of the Ralph Lauren Team USA collection support the U.S. Olympic team. Let's turn our attention to health and well-being. We have 7 tips on how to keep your eyes healthy and your vision sharp. Here's more on that.
Welcome to Strong Mind and Body. I'm Gina Marie. Your eyes work really hard. They stare at screens most of the day, keep you focused on the highway when you are driving, and make out what's on the menu in a darkened restaurant. While you may not think of it often, good vision and eye health contribute to the quality of your life. The reality is that when it comes to your eyesight, there are things that you just can't control. For example, when you age, the fine print gets blurrier and the magnification you need gets greater. That said, there are also a number of habits that you can cultivate to support the health of your eyes and help to prevent or slow the progression of eye diseases. Here are some of the ways that you can keep your eyes as healthy as possible. Number 1, cultivate habits that are kind to your eyes. Long hours of reading or in front of a screen can cause fatigue and weaken your vision. When you are reading for long periods, take frequent breaks every hour or so. Also, make sure you have enough light to avoid eye strain, especially when you're reading. Number 2, protect your eyes. Exposure to strong light, UV rays, and sunlight can damage your eyes over time. Use sunglasses that block UV rays. Wear eye protection when you're engaged in sports, and use protective goggles when you're doing home projects. If you spend most of your days in front of a screen, you can get these special glasses that actually block the blue light. They can help cut the glare, increase visual contrast, and enhance the images on the screen. Number 3, get regular eye exams. If you are under 40, your eyes should be checked every 2 to 4 years. If you are over 40, they should be checked every 2 years. If you are noticing any difference with your vision, for example blurry vision, be sure to get an eye examination once a year. Frequent eye exams translate into detecting problems early. Number 4, eat to nourish your eyes. Scientists have found that leafy greens and yellow vegetables can improve the health of your eyes. They also decrease your risk of macular degeneration and cataracts. Other foods that are good for your eyes include nuts, beans, citrus fruit, oily fish, and eggs. Number 5, use reading glasses if you need them. Loss of reading vision in people over the age of 40 years old is very common. Reading glasses, lovingly called cheaters, can help for close-up work because they magnify fine print. If you're in need of reading glasses, be sure you're using the right magnification for your eyesight. Going up to a stronger level doesn't make your eyes any weaker, but not using a strong enough magnification can contribute to eye strain. Number 6, keep your stress in check. Scientists have actually found that stress weakens the immune system and can even accelerate aging. High levels of stress can raise your blood pressure and put additional strain on your eyes. The bottom line is do whatever it takes. Meditation, healthy eating, and gardening can help. These relieve stress and support the health of your eyes. Number 7, make sure you are getting enough sleep. Your body heals and regenerates itself when you sleep, and your eyes are no exception. There's nothing worse than that burning feeling in your eyes when you haven't gotten enough rest. Typically, your vision isn't on your radar unless you begin to have problems with your eyes. However, a little preventative care can go a long way in keeping your eye issues at bay.
And that's all for now. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.